Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from the Flatbush Zombies, titled 3001, A Laced Odyssey. Now, I don't tend to cover many mixtapes, if I bother to cover them at all, and believe it or not, I actually have reasons for that. I do recognize that some artists, especially in hip-hop, will release some great work on mixtapes, and if you're not on top of that scene, you can fall behind on who has buzz, especially in the modern internet age. Now, that's not saying I don't occasionally listen to mixtapes that get sent my way, but if I covered every single tape that gets dropped or sent to me, I wouldn't be covering any other genres besides hip-hop. And let's be brutally honest here. While you can argue that there are a few artists like Lil Wayne who defined or redefined their best work on tapes, the majority use them as a cheap stopgap to drive buzz in an industry where hype is more fleeting than ever. That's why I have a lot of respect for artists who might drop less records and overall projects, but the ratio to quality tracks to filler or garbage is a lot more consistent. But what this has meant is that while I've heard about Flatbush Zombies, a New York hip-hop trio out of Brooklyn affiliated with the Underachievers and Pro Era, known for a kooky style of flow and delivery that careens through smoky production with bars that really managed to stick a lot more than I expected, I hadn't really explored many of their projects in detail beyond a few singles and that early mixtape. And while they had a few tapes in that collaboration EP with the Underachievers, 2015 had been a very quiet year for the Flatbush Zombies, which made the announcement about this record probably more of a surprise than it should have been, at least for me. But I figured now is as good of a time as any to dig into these guys, so what did we get? Well, am I the only one who thinks that this album should be better than it is? And believe me, after giving this album a lot of listens, I've come to the conclusion that this record is not bad in the slightest, but it's probably not for me. Maybe if you're more engrossed by the personalities and are smoky enough to get sucked into the atmosphere and detail, but for me, I kept re-listening to find the details that really sent this album over the top, and outside of a few bright moments, they didn't really materialize. The easiest comparison for me is the Underachievers, but where Flatbush Zombies have more immediacy and potent personality, it's not really backed up with as much hard wordplay, bars, and production to make it really stick with me long term. Definitely a good album, but I can't really call it great, even though, again, I totally get this album's appeal. And a lot of that appeal comes from our trio of frontmen, because all three of these guys have the personality and dexterity with cartoonish voices and flows to be compelling right out of the gate, and they can all spit really impressively well. Hell, when they play off that stage presence on tracks like the opener, the Odyssey, or Bounce, or Trade Off, or the first half of your favorite rap song, or especially Ascension, these tracks can hit with real punch behind them and will probably just kill on the festival circuit. Of the MCs, Michi Darko is probably the most immediate present with his more guttural, raspy tones that intentionally remind you of a cross between Busta Rhymes and ODB. But what caught me off guard was how strong Zombie Juice came to the microphone, who seems to be set on compensating for his higher pitch with a really expressive delivery and some great change-ups on his flow. I really like that. But if there is one MC that I was expecting a little bit more from, it'd be Eric the Architect. Given his slightly more contemplative flow and wordplay, but it's not like he skirts far from what you would expect from Flatbush Zombies, with the exception of Michi's hyperbolic and rather bloody fantasies. Yeah, I might as well get to content here, and the area where my opinion is bound to be the most contentious. And look, as I said, a lot of this material probably isn't for me. I don't do drugs, I don't engage in the sort of debauchery these guys describe, and last time I checked, I don't kill people. And I get the style what Flatbush Zombies do. It's rooted in a lot of the hyperbolic, zonked out drug hyperbole and violence that you would expect from such a contradictory group. Hell, the closest this album actually gets to social commentary is how certain people will turn to drugs in order to escape from the hell of the struggle, only to see themselves get dragged further into something that's far darker if they can't control it. And sure, there's some graphic and vivid imagery here, but quickly you realize that this album starts to repeat itself in terms of content, because it's not like there's any real storytelling here. You get independent label bragging, thrashing rappers who are ripping off their druggy styles and flows and not doing it as well, which is entirely true, I might add. Some pretty creative and borderline grotesque sex, in Michi's case a lot of graphic violence, and then all through it, a ton of drugs. And while you get fragments of melancholy about how Flatbush Zombies reflect on a world that's leaving them behind in the past, I found myself wishing for the distinctive balance that the Underachievers brought on their last album that was able to balance out against some of that darkness. But then again, when you have songs like Ascension, where Michi Darko seems entirely aware that he's damned and he's just gonna roll with it, you have to wonder if such a balance is even possible. One of the reasons why Trade-Off's Rest in Peace to Trayvon feels kinda out of place, especially followed by verses referencing Rosemary's Baby and Killing Cops. And sure, I get tracks like This Is It, where they try to put a message together on charting your own path and not trading artistic integrity for fame that compromises who you are, but that doesn't really align with taking potentially hazardous amounts of psychedelic drugs, which they themselves admit is changing who they are. Bit of a contradiction there. Well, you know what? I'm probably overthinking this. It's clearly not intended to be all that deep. It's intended for mostly to bang at the festivals and just get stoned to. If the production is killer, that won't matter, right? Well, here's the thing. It's not that the instrumentation or production is bad, but I can't help but feel that it should hit me a lot harder than it does. From what I've heard about the Flatbush Zombies in the past, they've got a solid grasp of melody, and that does come through here. The strings and piano that play off some great drum work on the Odyssey or Good Grief, the sparse and dreary guitar lines on Bounce and R.I.P.C.D or Trade Off, the warping synth against the hollow keys on Ascension, probably my favorite song on the album, or that deeper warble on your favorite rap song. And while these form a good foundation, the melodies feel oddly lacking in production support that these songs would need to have a killer hook or really distinctive vibe. There are some subtleties that I appreciate in terms of the instrumental shifts. I really dug the outro on Ascension and the hints of horns on the Spike Lee joint that led to a really chill outro I really dug, or the crack of thunder on your favorite rap song, or the sirens echoing throughout the beginning of R.I.P.C.D. But one of the elements that made the Flatbush Zombies jump out was production that went harder than this, or could at least match the vocal personalities and bars and its sheer out there weirdness. But okay, say they weren't going for that either, instead more of a stoned out meandering vibe, and yet even then, I say it's a little hit and miss here, especially with the two half-sung interludes on Fly Away and Smoke Break. There is some atmosphere, but it feels kind of thin and lacking in the same lush texture to really drag you under. And granted, this is where I really can't say if you're high as hell whether that will still work, but even with that, I feel like this record defaults to sparse piano and bassy textures a lot more than it should. Still good, mind you, I don't have any songs that I outright dislike in the instrumentation, but lacking that additional eccentricity to push them over the top, which I know the Flatbush Zombies are able to do. So look, with 3001 A Laced Odyssey, take this review with a grain of salt from a guy who doesn't smoke or do drugs and feels that you really shouldn't need them if the music is good enough. It should pull you under regardless. And yeah, this is good, but in terms of the content and production really sticking the landing, I'm not gonna call it great. I will say this trio has a very solid baseline of quality in terms of flow and personality and some good melodies there, which means it's getting a very, very light 7 out of 10, but even that feels a little generous given how much more they could have done with hooks and production and structuring a more lyrically compelling release. That said, if Getting Blazed is your thing, you'll probably dig this a lot more than I did. So if you're into weed rap that blows a fair chunk of the competition right out of the water with some decent wordplay, check this out. Pretty solid. You'll probably enjoy it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I've got the poll up there, so everyone who wants to tell me that I'm so wrong and this record you just get lit and blazed to, just make sure up there. The rating's up there. I'd be curious where you guys fall on this album. But beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be glad to give them a listen. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.